We start tonight with a reported major shift in American foreign policy in Syria. President Trump will end the CIA's program to arm and train Syrian rebels fighting against the Assad government.
The program began in 2013 under the Obama administration as a way to indirectly fight the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. It's had a rough track record. CIA weapons have ended up on the black market, and the newly armed rebels have sometimes bolstered more radical groups or fought against other U.S.-backed rebels. The Washington Post, which broke the story, noted several officials wanted to shutter the program near the end of President Barack Obama's term, but even the skeptics thought the program could still be useful as a bargaining chip with Russia. Russia and the U.S. have been competing for military influence in Syria for years. Russia has been bombing the CIA-backed rebels in earnest, claiming they're targeting the terrorist groups that sometimes ally with those rebels. The Post reports Trump decided to end the program about a month ago, before his face-to-face meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the G20 summit. A new ceasefire in southern Syria was announced after that meeting. The CIA's program is expected to be phased out over the next few months. This won't affect a separate Department of Defense program to coordinate with other moderate Syrian rebel groups.
The Turkish state news agency has released a list of U.S. military bases in northern Syria as relations between the two NATO allies take another downturn. The outlet claims to have detected Washington's hidden outposts located in Kurdish-held areas and gives detailed information about 10 bases. And they are supposed to help the Syrian Kurds in their fight against Islamic State. The Pentagon has said it's concerned about the Turkish government revealing the sensitive details.
While we cannot independently verify the sources that contributed to this story, we would be very concerned if officials from a NATO ally would purposefully endanger our forces by releasing sensitive information.
While the row between Washington and Ankara has been brewing over America's support of Kurdish forces in the region, the Turkish government has criticised the US on several occasions for arming and supporting what it deems to be terrorist groups.
Well, some Iraqi troops admit that in the fight against ISIS, it isn't just about justice for them. It's about revenge. Graphic videos have emerged showing troops in Mosul capturing terror group suspects and throwing them off a high wall next to the Tigris River, one by one. This is a still from one of those videos. CBS News cannot verify the authenticity of the video, but it matches reports on a series of revenge killings in Mosul. A few Iraqi officers spoke to the Associated Press and defended their actions. Their practices are justified, they said, because ISIS's rule is in place in Iraq where, quote, they're so cruel and that it should be exempt from the rules of war. Iraq declared victory in Mosul earlier this month, driving out ISIS forces after the city served as a group stronghold for the last 3 years.
According to intelligence and local officials, months before U.S.-backed Iraqi forces ended Islamic State's 3-year reign of terror in Mosul, the militant group put aside the idea of a modern-day caliphate and began preparing for a different fight. Experts believe what comes next may be a more complex and daunting challenge for Iraqi security forces once they finish celebrating a hard-won victory in Mosul, the militants' biggest stronghold. Intelligence and security officials are preparing for a similar kind of devastating insurgency than al-Qaeda waged following the 2003 U.S.-led invasion. Lahir Talabani, a top Kurdish counterterrorism official, told Reuters, "I believe we have tougher days coming."
Kuwait has ordered the expulsion of about 15 Iranian diplomats after the Emirates' top courts convicted a terror cell of links to Tehran. Now, this came after Saudi Arabia and 3 regional allies are urging Qatar to commit to 6 principles, including a combating terrorism. Now, Saudi Arabia's ambassador to the United Nations, Abdullah al-Mualimi, says the 4 countries' foreign ministers agreed on 6 principles at a meeting in Cairo on July 5th. Now, Qatar denies aiding terrorists and is threatening legal action in response to the blockade. Turkey has sided with Qatar in the crisis and has called on Saudi Arabia to drop the 13 demands.
Now, over 10 years after United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701 called for the disarmament of Hezbollah, the Islamist terror group has more rockets and munitions than ever. And Israel says the Iran-sponsored Shiite group has been gathering intelligence on the Israeli border through a front group posing as an environmental NGO.
On Tuesday, the IDF released 2 videos it says show Hezbollah operating on the border in violation of Resolution 1701. In one of the videos, there is apparent collaboration between Hezbollah and Green Without Borders, an ostensibly environmentalist group. Green Without Borders has set up a number of watchtowers along the Israel-Lebanon border, which they claim are for gathering ecological information. But Israel says they're really meant for gathering intel on Israeli troop positions and other information. Along with that, Israel says Hezbollah activists regularly patrol the border, and they've even identified Facebook pages belonging to some of the terrorists. On Thursday, the United Nations Security Council is set to deliberate on the success of the decade-old Resolution 1701, where the UNIFIL peacekeeping force says that it's doing its job and that Hezbollah is not active on the border. But according to the head of the Israeli military intelligence, UNIFIL is just burying its head in the sand.
Israel's been saying for years that UNIFIL has been doing nothing to prevent Hezbollah from rearming itself for its next war with Israel, and it looks like U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, agrees. Haley held a meeting with the UN envoy for Lebanon, Sigrid Kaag, in anticipation of the UN Security Council meeting today. They were set to discuss how and if the UNIFIL peacekeeping force is fulfilling its directive. According to a statement put out by the U.S., Haley, quote, expressed alarm over the buildup of weapons by Hezbollah and has stressed that the international community, quote, must apply more pressure on Hezbollah. Israeli intelligence believes that Hezbollah has over 100,000 missiles all across southern Lebanon, in the basements of homes and hospitals, and Iran has even constructed missile factories in Lebanon, according to Arabic media. In June, Haley went on a tour of the Israeli-Lebanon border with an IDF major general who got into a heated argument with the commander of UNIFIL over their failure to disarm Hezbollah.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was caught on hot mic telling Central European leaders that Europe will shrivel and disappear if it does not change its policy on Israel.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been caught on a live microphone, saying the EU is crazy to put conditions on Israel in an attempt to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Russia doesn't condition it, India doesn't condition it, China doesn't condition it, African countries were back and forth. The only ones who are conditioning the association with Israel, the European, the EU Association Agreement, it's absolutely, may I say, I think it's crazy. I think it's actually crazy. It's against, I'm not talking about my interests, Israel's interests. I'm talking about Europe's interests.
Netanyahu also said the EU should support Israel because it was essential to the bloc's prosperity and survival, and it could also prevent more mass migration.
One, don't undermine the one Western country that defends European values and European interests and prevents another mass migration to Europe. So stop attacking Israel, start supporting Israel.
Several European countries have been engulfed in that ongoing migrant crisis. Italy, big time, which is now accepting most of those coming to Europe, is in a standoff right now with other members of the bloc over how best to handle this crisis. Over in Spain, activists have protested against refugee policies and violations of human rights, while in Greece, an angry demonstration has been held against delays in the immigration process. In fact, those delays have left thousands separated from their families and they're basically stranded in Greece. Divisions between different ethnic groups have also been emerging in these overcrowded camps to add to the problems.
The main problem, which is most of the refugees are still waiting for the decisions.
The African people,
sometimes if they are just start fighting,
they want to get their rights by their hand and voice. They consider Syrian people that get asylum quickly.
People coming from Africa feeling neglected. When they arrived, suddenly they faced the different treatment because of their skin color or because of different other variables. When you feel that not receiving your interview in a couple of months, but in 4, 5, 6 months, you're seeing that there's a long rejection rate for your community or for the group of people you are from, your tension and your frustration raises.
Activists in a Danish town have chosen a novel way to bring their worries over a new mosque to the mayor's attention, literally by blasting the early morning call to prayer right at their windows.
If you want to convince me or just find a solution, please contact me properly. I'm always available in public and at City Hall. But 5 a.m. at my private residence is not my choice for political appointments.
The mosque is the first in Denmark to have minarets and will have the possibility to set up some loudspeakers too to broadcast the calls to prayer.
The U.S. and China have failed to agree on any major trade issues after an annual economic dialogue session between the two countries. At its conclusion, the usual press conference was cancelled and no joint statement was issued. Reuters cited a senior official who said the two sides had a frank exchange, but no agreements were reached on such issues as a trade deficit, China's steel overproduction, and access to China's financial services markets. This comes as further blow to President Trump's relationship with Beijing. Trump met with Chinese President Xi Jinping back in April, where they launched a 100-day economic plan, but this plan has so far led to no new initiatives. The Trump administration has also become increasingly frustrated at China's lack of action to rein in North Korea.
Russia, one of North Korea's traditional allies, has issued a strongly worded statement on the regime's nuclear issue. The Kremlin said Wednesday that the Korean peninsula has to be denuclearized and all related sides should exercise restraint. The statement came before President Putin hosted an emergency national security meeting. The Kremlin added that Moscow's position has not changed and it supports all political and diplomatic efforts to remove nuclear weapons from the Korean peninsula. Russia has signaled that it will join the UN Security Council's move to enact sanctions on Pyongyang, but it opposes excessive pressure.
Could North Korea be about to lob more missiles into the East Sea? Analyzing photos released by the regime, experts say the North could be readying for a missile provocation involving its new submarine-launched ballistic missile, or SLBM.
North Korea has revealed nearly 200 photographs of its missile arsenal. They were showcased at a special performance on July 9th, celebrating the regime's successful testing of its first intercontinental ballistic missile a few days earlier. Along with a Korean character that presumably reads Pukguksang, the last character on a missile-shaped canister next to the North leader Kim Jong-un looks like either a 3 or an 8. Pukguksang-type missiles previously revealed by the regime include the Pukguksang-2, a road-mobile medium-range missile, and the Pukguksang, a submarine-launched ballistic missile, or SLBM. Experts say the photos could signal that the regime is preparing for another round of provocations involving a new SLBM.
China announced that it has begun commercial production of its most powerful drone, the CH-5 Rainbow, which it touts as an answer to the U.S.'s MQ-9 Reaper. On July 17th, the South China Morning Post reported that China was moving ahead with plans to mass-produce the strike-capable UAV, which was unveiled at Airshow China last November. The announcement came 3 days after the first mass production model of the CH-5 conducted its first flight. The CH-5 can carry 16 missiles, stay airborne for up to 60 hours without refueling, and boasts a range of more than 6,200 miles. Beijing has touted the CH-5 as just as good as the American-made top seller at half the price. The Reaper, with a price tag of $16.9 million, is currently the world's most expensive drone.
The Chinese government has warned neighboring India to withdraw its troops from the disputed Doklam border area to avoid further escalation of the situation. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Liu Kang made the comments during a regular press briefing Tuesday. According to CNN, they came amid what has become an increasingly bitter and entrenched 5-week border dispute between the two nations. On Monday, China conducted live fire drills close to the site of the current standoff. Reports in Chinese state media say the aim of the drills was to improve troops' combat capability in such locations.
U.S. Senator John McCain, who was the 2008 Republican presidential nominee, has been diagnosed with an aggressive form of brain cancer. The 80-year-old lawmaker had been recovering at home following surgery to remove a blood clot from above his eye. Tests since that procedure have revealed a tumor associated with the clot. McCain is a former Navy pilot and was re-elected to a 6th Senate term in November.
This is not Russia. To Donald Trump and his pathetic band,
Well, that was Rosie O'Donnell back in February. America's loudest Trump-hating liberal is now encouraging her Twitter followers to play a sick online game to harm the president.
Recently, she tweeted a link to a website that allows you to take out your frustration with the president online with the caption, "Push Trump off a cliff." The link allows you to push the president off a virtual cliff, into a volcano, into traffic, or let him be eaten by a T-Rex. Conservatives, however, are not amused. Some have accused O'Donnell and the game of promoting violence. O'Donnell, however, is not backing off, retweeting the link a second time.
The Washington Post reports assisted suicide is legal and available in Washington, D.C. for the time being. The law took effect on Monday, a week after a U.S. House panel voted to repeal the city's Death with Dignity Act. Officials now say doctors can begin the process of prescribing life-ending drugs to terminally ill patients. The D.C. Health Department also launched a website where physicians can register to participate in the Death with Dignity program. Patients must be older than 18, with less than 6 months to live in order to be eligible.
One of the nation's biggest school districts goes sour on chocolate milk. San Francisco, shocking, banning flavored milk from elementary and middle schools as part of an effort to eliminate sugary foods from the cafeterias. That's a shame. That was my favorite, chocolate milk.
Marijuana is now being sold legally from pharmacies in Uruguay. People queued up to be among the first in the South American nation to take advantage of the change in law. The substance is available as part of a 2013 measure that has made Uruguay the first nation to legalize a pot market covering the entire chain from plants to purchase. The authorities say nearly 5,000 people have registered as consumers, allowing them to buy up to 40 grams per month. It's all part of efforts to fight rising homicide and crime rates associated with drug trafficking.
Ra một chiếc còn mơ trăng rồi ra mơ trăng vầng trăng đo cái tục ấy nó nhưng ta câu ấy nó đăng mấy cồn ma đã khơi như là nghề
đặc biệt cho tất cả máu mà là máu
A team of Korean researchers announced on Wednesday that they have successfully transplanted the cornea of a genetically engineered pig onto a lab monkey. The primate has been able to retain its eyesight for 234 days and counting, and has shown no signs of infection or immune system rejection. This is especially remarkable as it was done without the use of immunosuppressants, drugs that inhibit immune system activity to prevent organ rejection. This welcome news will raise hope for millions of people suffering from visual impairments caused by corneal diseases.
The cornea itself carries comparatively lower risk of rejection. That's why in human-to-human transplants, there's little need to use immunosuppressants.
Previous corneal transplant experiments in Korea were studied for a period of 90 days post-surgery, but the observation period has now tripled. In the U.S., which is a global leader in this groundbreaking field, the experiment and observation period lasts for 2 years. The latest experiment by Korean researchers involved a genetically modified pig, which had 2 genes removed to minimize the risk of rejection.
There are many genes that can cause organ rejection. We'll be removing them one by one in genetically altered pigs.
Scientists are hoping this latest research will eventually lead to direct corneal transplants from pigs to human beings. Medical teams in China have already conducted such operations where patients were reported to have regained their eyesight without any adverse side effects. Other countries, however, are still taking a more cautious approach.
Tech Radar has reported that a team based at the University of Utah has developed a new process for creating holograms that make them much cheaper to manufacture while improving the color, brightness, and viewing angle. It has managed this by creating a film that, when a light is shown through it, creates a hologram that can apparently create an image akin to a full-color photograph. The paper was published on the Scientific Reports section of Nature.
Apple may be working on a new way to use its Touch ID technology to make contacting emergency services faster and easier. A newly published patent file under Apple shows a method for using a biometric sensor similar to the fingerprint scanner on the iPhone 6 and Up's home button to discreetly trigger an emergency call. Originally filed in March 2013, the patent describes using a system that can recognize the frequency, force, and even specific fingerprint used on the sensor to execute particular commands. The patent's summary also describes how the system could be used to quickly activate a panic alarm, which could send a GPS signal to local emergency responders, wipe local data during a theft, or even activate a live video-audio stream to record an incident.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration believes it has the beginnings of a new model that could allow for tornadoes to be predicted hours rather than minutes in advance. In May, the NOAA tested a new model called the Warn-On Forecast on a swarm of tornadoes in Oklahoma, and just this week they announced that the data shows that the new model was a qualified success. The Warn-On Forecast system uses lots of data, including radar and satellite imaging, to issue earlier notifications to those in the path of the storm. The NOAA believes the new model will help to save lives while helping others get prepped for potential disaster.
A flash flood leaves behind a devastating scene in the coastal village of Coverack in Cornwall. Snapped twigs, broken glass, and muddy roads are all evidence of the flood's ferocity. Many are still trying to recover.
I've never seen anything like it. That's why they said don't come out in the house.
Well, as long as we can get it up and running again, it'll be okay. It's such a busy time of year, you know, so it's nuts. It's just crazy.
According to the UK Environment Department, precipitation during Tuesday's heavy rain reached 10 centimetres within 3 hours. In a video released by the UK Coast Guard, residents were being lifted by helicopter out of a submerged house. Out of the 6 trapped, 2 were rescued. It wasn't clear what happened to the other 4 people in the house. Cornwall Fire and Rescue Services also reportedly responded to multiple flooding-related incidents. One fire officer described a terrifying experience.
One of our crews found a lady who was trapped in a small extension on her property, and literally as they brought her out through a window, the side wall and window collapsed in there.
Authorities have yet to release the exact number of casualties, but Cornish residents have decided to ward off the anxiety of waiting by dealing with the mess. People are clearing the main street of rocks and debris to make sure traffic is restored. Trucks are brought to carry mud back to the coast. Volunteers are reinforcing the river banks to prepare for the future. Estimates put the cost of repairs at over £1 million, with many roads and buildings still needing attention.
Those are all your movies, dude. Look at these movies! Look at all these movies! And all over the ball! Ooh! Not for real. Oh my God.
And then, I knew that we needed to travel with our original life, with our Tasha Apai.
Alright, what? Mark, will you look at all the ones you got? Look at all of them. Mark, are you excited? These are all your new videos. Mark, which one are you gonna watch first? What is it?